What if I told you that behind the fame, flashy music videos, and chart-topping hits, some of R&B's brightest stars ended their lives in heartbreaking poverty? From legends who once ruled the airwaves to voices that defined generations, their stories ended in tragedy. Here are 15 R&B stars who died with nothing. Marvin Gaye. When you speak of soul music, Marvin Gaye's name is impossible to ignore. He was not just a singer, he was a storyteller, a poet whose music gave voice to love, struggle, and the social upheavals of his time. Hits like What's Going On and Let's Get It On were cultural statements, deeply personal yet universally resonant. Yet behind the smooth falsettos and mesmerizing rhythms lay a life that the spotlight could not protect from devastation. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Marvin faced serious financial problems. He owed large sums in taxes, had multiple lawsuits over royalties, and was struggling to manage his income. Years of substance use and personal issues added to the strain. His relationships with family members and close friends were tense and often conflict-filled. The life of fame he had worked so hard to achieve could not protect him from mounting debts and isolation. Tragically, Marvin's life ended far too soon, and in circumstances that seemed almost unbearably cruel. At just 44, he was shot by his own father during a domestic dispute, a violent end that starkly contrasted with the love and compassion his music so often conveyed. At the time of his death, Marvin was not only emotionally worn, but financially depleted. The man who once commanded stages around the world, who sold millions of records, died in a state of debt and distress, leaving behind a legacy richer than any bank account, yet a cautionary shadow of what fame without stability can bring. Marvin Gaye's story is a stark reminder that wealth and fame do not guarantee security or stability. His voice continues to influence generations of artists, but the circumstances of his final years reveal the harsh realities behind the success. He left behind music that endures, a complex personal history, and a life that ended far too soon. The contrast between his artistic legacy and his private struggles remains one of the most tragic in R&B history. Let's get in on. Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson was a powerhouse performer whose voice and stage presence set new standards in R&B and soul. He played a key role in shaping the genre, influencing generations of singers with hits like Lonely Teardrops, Higher and Higher, and Baby Workout. During the 1950s and 60s, Wilson was a household name, performing to sold-out audiences and selling millions of records. His charisma and energy on stage captivated fans, making him one of the most electrifying performers of his era. Yet despite this immense success, the later years of his life were defined by hardship, neglect, and financial instability. In 1975, Wilson suffered a severe heart attack while performing, leaving him in a vegetative state. At that time, he had little health insurance and no substantial savings to cover the costs of long-term care. His family struggled to provide for his needs, relying on low-cost nursing facilities to manage his condition. The vibrant performer who had once commanded stages and inspired audiences now depended entirely on others for survival. Medical expenses quickly consumed whatever remaining income he had, and he spent the remainder of his life in financial distress. Wilson's situation was further compounded by a lack of financial planning and mismanagement. Despite earning substantial sums during his peak years, poor investments and inadequate management of funds meant his wealth could not support him during illness and inactivity. Industry friends and colleagues offered little support, and as his public visibility diminished, so too did the attention to his welfare. Jackie Wilson died in 1984, largely forgotten by the music industry that had once celebrated him. He passed away not amidst the cheers of fans or the glamour of the stage, but in quiet struggle and hardship. His story is a stark contrast between early triumph and later tragedy, a reminder that fame and talent alone cannot safeguard against misfortune. Jackie Wilson's music remains influential, yet his life ended in neglect, financial insecurity, and obscurity, a poignant and tragic testament to the vulnerability behind the spotlight. Billy Preston. Billy Preston was a gifted musician whose talent on the keyboard made him a sought-after collaborator for some of the biggest names in music. He played with the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and countless other stars, contributing to some of the most iconic recordings in rock and soul history. His own solo work also earned acclaim, including hits like Nothing from Nothing and Will It Go Round in Circles. Despite this success, Preston's life was marked by financial instability and personal struggles. Preston faced a long battle with addiction that affected both his personal life and career. Substance abuse led to periods of unreliability, legal trouble, and a decline in professional opportunities. At the same time, he accumulated significant debt from unpaid taxes and mismanaged earnings. Although he had performed on some of the most lucrative tours and sessions in music history, the income he earned often vanished in legal fees, living expenses, and addiction-related costs. By the end of his life, Billy Preston was largely alone. He had no substantial savings or financial security to rely on, and he died without the comfort of the wealth his talent should have provided. The man who had contributed to legendary albums and played in front of millions of fans ended his life in quiet struggle, largely removed from the public eye. Preston passed away in 2006 at the age of 59, leaving behind a legacy of music that remains influential across genres. His story highlights the hidden difficulties that can accompany even the most successful careers. Despite the fame and admiration he earned from audiences and fellow musicians, his final years were overshadowed by poverty, addiction, and the isolation that so often follows unchecked personal and financial challenges in the music industry. Nothing from Nothing. DMX. DMX was one of the most powerful voices in rap and hip-hop, known for a raw intensity that set him apart from his peers. Songs like Rough Riders Anthem and Party Up were anthems for a generation, filled with aggression, vulnerability, and truth. His lyrics captured both the struggles of street life and the personal battles he faced. On stage, he commanded attention and energy that few could match, but behind the music, his life was filled with chaos. Throughout his career, DMX struggled with addiction, legal troubles, and financial instability. His substance abuse led to multiple arrests, periods of imprisonment, and strained relationships with family and collaborators. Legal problems included lawsuits, fines, and tax debts that grew into a massive financial burden. At the time of his death, he reportedly owed more than $1 million in unpaid taxes and had no significant assets to his name. The wealth he had earned from platinum albums, sold-out tours, and lucrative contracts was largely gone, consumed by debts, legal fees, and personal struggles. DMX also left behind a large family, including 15 children, who were left facing the consequences of his financial collapse. The contrast between his public success and private struggles was stark. The man who energized arenas and inspired millions lived much of his life under pressure, burdened by addiction, debt, and instability. On April 9, 2021, DMX died at the age of 50 following a heart attack triggered by an overdose. His passing revealed the harsh reality that talent and fame do not guarantee security or peace. His music continues to resonate, but the circumstances of his final years show a life caught between extraordinary success and relentless personal turmoil, leaving a legacy both inspiring and tragic. Rough Riders Anthem. Odetta Holmes. Odetta Holmes was a towering figure in folk and R&B, known as the Voice of Freedom. Her music became anthems for the civil rights movement and she inspired countless artists with her powerful delivery and social conscience. Songs like "Oh Freedom" and "Another Man Done Gone" showcased a talent that was as technically skilled as it was emotionally stirring. Despite her influence and recognition within the music community, Odetta never experienced financial security, and her later years were marked by hardship. Throughout her life, Odetta struggled to translate her talent into sustainable wealth. Record sales and critical acclaim did not provide the financial stability she needed. Management issues and the limited commercial market for her style of music meant that she received little financial reward for decades of work. Even as her contributions were celebrated, the money to support a comfortable life remained out of reach. Medical bills and the rising cost of living further strained her finances, leaving her dependent on minimal savings and assistance from friends. Odetta continued performing into her later years, driven by passion rather than profit. She toured small venues, appeared at cultural events, and remained committed to her craft, even as her financial situation worsened. Unlike many of her peers, she did not leave behind a fortune or assets that could provide security in her final years. She passed away in December 2008 at the age of 75. By that time, she had lived a life of artistic brilliance overshadowed by financial insecurity. The woman who gave voice to freedom and inspired generations died in relative poverty. Her contributions widely acknowledged, but her personal circumstances overlooked. Odetta Holmes's story is a reminder that influence and impact do not always translate into financial reward, and that even the most celebrated artists can face hardship and obscurity in their final years. Another Man Done Gone. Nat King Cole. Nat King Cole was one of the most iconic figures in jazz and R&B. His smooth baritone and effortless style made him a household name, and he broke racial barriers as a performer and television host. Hits like Unforgettable and Mona Lisa defined an era and secured his place in music history. Despite his widespread acclaim and commercial success, Cole faced significant financial challenges during his life. Racial discrimination limited some of his opportunities, both on stage and in business. Cole was often excluded from venues, clubs, and contracts that were available to white performers. Management issues and poor financial planning further complicated his situation, leaving him without the security that should have accompanied his talent and fame. Although he earned substantial sums from record sales and appearances, much of it was offset by taxes, debts, and expenses, and he struggled to build lasting wealth. Cole continued performing tirelessly, touring extensively to maintain his income. He remained a consummate professional, delivering performances that captivated audiences around the world, even as he carried the burden of financial pressure and societal obstacles. Personal and family responsibilities added to his obligations, stretching his resources and leaving him vulnerable to financial strain. Nat King Cole passed away in February 1965 at the age of 45 from lung cancer. At the time of his death, he had little financial security, despite a career that seemed limitless in both fame and influence. The contrast between his public image and private struggles was stark. He left behind music that continues to inspire and define generations, but his life ended with financial challenges that few fans would have imagined. Nat King Cole's story is a reminder that even iconic talent and global recognition cannot always shield artists from economic hardship and the pressures of life beyond the stage. Mona Live Video, live performance. If you are enjoying this video, show some love with a thumbs up, and if you have not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Dennis Wilson. Dennis Wilson, the drummer of the Beach Boys, was a talented musician whose contributions helped define the sound of an era. He was known for his distinctive voice, charismatic stage presence, and creative songwriting. Songs like Forever and Little Bird showcased his musical depth and cemented his place in rock and R&B history. Despite his talent and fame, Dennis's personal life was fraught with turmoil, addiction, and financial instability. Throughout his life, Dennis struggled with substance abuse that affected both his career and personal relationships. His erratic behavior led to missed opportunities and strained connections within the music industry. Financial mismanagement compounded his problems, leaving him vulnerable despite the commercial success of the Beach Boys. Property losses, unpaid bills, and mounting debt created a cycle of instability that he could not escape. Dennis also experienced periods of homelessness, living in unstable conditions and relying on friends and acquaintances to get by. While the rest of the band continued to generate wealth and maintain public visibility, Dennis's life became increasingly isolated and precarious. The contrast between the surf rock fame he once enjoyed and the hardships he endured in private grew sharper with each passing year. In December 1983, Dennis Wilson drowned at the age of 39. His death was sudden and tragic, a violent end to a life marked by both extraordinary musical talent and relentless personal struggle. At the time, he was financially depleted and emotionally vulnerable, far removed from the success and recognition that had once defined him. The man whose voice and rhythm had energized audiences and shaped a generation of music ended his life in obscurity, a stark reminder that fame can be fleeting and that personal demons can overshadow even the brightest talent. Dennis Wilson's story is one of brilliance and despair intertwined, leaving a legacy that is as haunting as it is influential. Forever Live Concert. Sly Stone. Sly Stone was the mastermind behind Sly and the Family Stone, a group that transformed funk and soul music. His innovative sound blended rock, soul, and psychedelic influences, producing hits like Family Affair and Everyday People that remain classics. Stone's music challenged social norms and broke barriers, yet behind the groundbreaking artistry, his personal and financial life was unraveling. Despite massive success in the late 1960s and early 1970s, Sly struggled with addiction and erratic behavior that disrupted both his career and personal relationships. His financial affairs were poorly managed, and he lost control of much of his wealth due to mismanagement and legal battles over royalties. Years of substance abuse compounded these issues, leaving him unable to sustain the fortune his talent had earned. Reports indicate that in later years, Sly Stone lived in extreme poverty. He was said to reside in a van, surviving on Social Security and the minimal support he could find from friends. The man who once performed on major stages and created music that defined a generation was reduced to near invisibility, cut off from the industry he helped shape. His voice that once carried energy, hope, and revolution faded into obscurity, overshadowed by personal struggle and isolation. Sly Stone's life remained a sharp contrast between public acclaim and private collapse. At the height of his fame, he was celebrated, lauded, and influential. In the years that followed, he became almost a ghost, disconnected from both the success he had earned and the audience that had once revered him. The funk pioneer's story ended in a state far removed from the stages and studios that had defined him. His legacy lives in the music he created, but his later years were defined by neglect, poverty, and a quiet disappearance from the world he had once electrified. Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix is remembered as one of the most revolutionary guitarists in the history of rock and R&B. His performances were electrifying, his style unmatched, and songs like Purple Haze, Voodoo Child, and The Wind Cries. Mary became instant classics. Hendrix was more than a musician. He was a visionary who reshaped the sound of a generation and influenced countless artists across genres. He commanded attention on stage with his energy and originality, yet behind the public adoration, his life was filled with financial troubles and personal instability. Despite earning large sums from record sales, tours, and endorsements, Hendrix faced serious financial difficulties. Poor management and exploitative contracts meant that much of his income was consumed by debts, unpaid obligations, and legal disputes over royalties. Even as his fame soared, his financial situation remained precarious. Hendrix's personal life further complicated matters. He struggled with substance abuse that affected his judgment, strained relationships, and limited his ability to secure lasting stability. His career, though brilliant, was constantly shadowed by these underlying challenges, leaving him vulnerable despite public perception of success. By the time of his death, Hendrix had no substantial wealth to leave behind. The man who had performed in front of thousands and recorded some of the most influential music in modern history lived with mounting debts and uncertainty. His personal struggles were largely hidden behind the spectacle of his performances, creating a stark contrast between the legend on stage and the man off stage. Jimi Hendrix died on September 18, 1970, at the age of 27. His death was sudden and tragic, the result of asphyxiation after an accidental overdose. He left behind a grieving family and millions of fans who mourned not only his talent, but the unrealized potential of a life cut far too short. Hendrix's music endures, but his final years were marked by instability, financial strain, and chaos, a haunting reminder that even genius cannot always escape misfortune. Prince Rogers Nelson. Prince Rogers Nelson was a musical genius whose influence on R&B, funk, and pop remains unmatched. From his early hits like Little Red Corvette to the genre-defining Purple Rain, Prince combined songwriting, vocals, and instrumental mastery to create music that transcended generations. He was a prolific performer, recording artist, and producer, commanding attention on stage and in the studio with creativity that seemed limitless. Yet behind the glamour and success, Prince's life was marked by financial and personal challenges that remained largely invisible to the public. Despite earning millions from record sales, tours, and licensing deals, Prince faced significant financial difficulties in his later years. He managed much of his business independently, but contractual disputes, unpaid royalties, and tax obligations placed a heavy burden on him. Legal battles over music rights drained resources and created ongoing stress. While his career generated wealth and acclaim, the management of that wealth was complex, and his later life was far from secure. Prince also faced personal struggles that affected his finances and health. His relentless work ethic, constant touring, and focus on artistic independence often left him isolated and vulnerable. Substance use further complicated his well-being, contributing to health issues that were not publicly addressed until his death. Despite the adoration of fans and recognition from the industry, the pressures of managing fame, fortune, and personal challenges weighed heavily on him. Prince Rogers Nelson died on April 21, 2016, at the age of 57. His death was sudden and tragic, caused by an accidental overdose of prescription pain medication. The man who had created a world of music, inspired millions, and dominated charts ended his life with unresolved financial and health struggles. Prince left behind an unparalleled legacy of sound and innovation, but his final years were defined by the tension between genius and vulnerability, the wealth of talent overshadowed by personal and financial instability. The brilliance of his music endures, yet the circumstances of his passing remain a stark and haunting contrast to the life he once led. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was one of the most celebrated voices in R&B and pop music. Her powerful vocals and emotional delivery made her a global superstar. Hits like I Will Always Love You, Greatest Love of All, and How Will I Know showcased a talent that seemed unmatched. She broke records, won numerous awards, and became an icon of both music and culture. Yet behind the fame and wealth, her life was marked by personal struggles and financial instability. Despite her immense success, Whitney faced serious challenges managing her finances. Years of expensive lifestyle choices, legal disputes, and costly personal problems drained her wealth. Substance abuse further complicated matters, leading to erratic behavior, canceled performances, and professional setbacks. Contracts and record deals that should have secured long-term stability were often overshadowed by spending habits, mismanagement, and the escalating costs of addiction. Her personal life added additional pressure. High-profile relationships and a turbulent marriage created both public scrutiny and private stress. Family conflicts and legal battles contributed to her isolation, making her financial and emotional struggles even more difficult to manage. Fans saw the glamour and the awards, but few witnessed the mounting pressure and instability behind the scenes. Whitney Houston died on February 11, 2012, at the age of 48. She was found in a hotel bathtub, and her death was ruled an accidental drowning with contributing factors from substance use and heart disease. The woman whose voice had captivated millions ended her life in solitude and struggle, with financial pressures unresolved and personal demons left unchecked. Whitney left behind a legacy of music that continues to inspire, yet her final years were overshadowed by chaos, addiction, and instability. The brilliance she shared with the world stood in stark contrast to the private battles that ultimately consumed her. Her story remains a tragic testament to the vulnerability that can follow even the brightest talent. Toni Braxton. Toni Braxton rose to fame in the 90s as one of the most successful R&B artists of her generation. Known for her distinctive contralto voice and hits like Unbreak My Heart, Breathe Again, and He Was Not, she won multiple Grammy Awards and achieved multi-platinum sales worldwide. Her music connected with millions, and she became a symbol of talent and elegance in the industry. Yet despite her commercial success, Toni faced a series of personal and financial struggles that cast a shadow over her career. Throughout her life, Braxton encountered repeated financial challenges. Multiple bankruptcies over the years highlighted the precariousness of her financial situation. Contract disputes, health issues, downs, and costly lifestyle expenses drained her earnings and left her vulnerable despite her multi-platinum albums. Even as she toured extensively and released chart-topping singles, the money she earned was offset by mounting obligations and legal entanglements. Health problems further complicated her life and finances. Braxton battled lupus and other medical conditions that required expensive treatment and limited her ability to work consistently. The combination of medical expenses and mismanaged wealth created a persistent cycle of instability that haunted her even at the height of her fame. Toni Braxton's story demonstrates the gap between public perception and private reality. On stage, she exuded confidence, grace, and mastery of her craft. Off stage, she faced relentless pressures from debt, health struggles, and contractual disputes. Her personal and financial battles remained largely hidden from fans, creating a stark contrast between her image and her reality. Despite her fame and talent, Toni Braxton's life was marked by hardship and struggle. She faced repeated setbacks that threatened both her career and financial stability. The artist who captivated millions with her voice endured years of vulnerability, stress, and uncertainty, leaving her story as much about struggle and survival as it is about music. Her life, even at the height of success, remained shadowed by challenges she could not fully overcome. TLC. TLC was one of the most successful girl groups in R&B and pop history. Composed of Tionne Watkins, Rosanda Thomas, and the late Lisa Lopes, the group produced hits like Waterfalls, No Scrubs, and Creep that dominated the charts and earned them worldwide fame. TLC's music addressed love, social issues, and female empowerment, resonating with millions of fans. Despite massive success and selling millions of records, the members of TLC faced extreme financial difficulties that overshadowed their achievements. During their rise to fame, TLC earned significant revenue from record sales, tours, and merchandise. Yet despite these earnings, poor management, exploitative contracts, and high expenses meant that the group saw only a fraction of the money they generated. Financial mismanagement and legal obligations drained their resources, leaving them in severe debt despite selling tens of millions of albums. At the height of their fame, they reportedly owed millions to the Internal Revenue Service, creating a situation that was both shocking and humbling for performers of their status. Adding to their struggles, personal challenges affected the members individually. Lisa Lopes faced pressure from public scrutiny, industry demands, and the burden of financial strain, while Tian Watkins battled health issues that limited her ability to perform consistently. Rosanda Thomas also dealt with the stress of managing fame alongside unresolved financial obligations. The combination of external pressure and internal challenges created a sense of constant instability for the group. TLC's financial collapse reached its peak in the late 1990s when the members filed for bankruptcy. Their story shocked fans and the industry, revealing that even massive commercial success could not protect artists from financial ruin. The contrast between their public image as successful, powerful performers and the reality of debt, legal battles, and personal hardship was stark. The group continued to perform and create music, but the shadow of financial instability never fully lifted. TLC's legacy is defined not only by their groundbreaking contributions to music, but also by the harsh reality that commercial success did not translate into security. The story of TLC is one of talent, fame, and relentless struggle, leaving a tragic imprint on the history of R&B and pop music. Waterfall's official video. David Williams. David Williams was a remarkable session guitarist whose talent shaped some of the most iconic R&B and pop recordings of the 80s and 90s. Known for his precise rhythm and ability to elevate any track, he played on albums for artists including Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Whitney Houston. Williams' guitar work can be heard on legendary hits like Billie Jean, Rock With You, and I Wanna Dance With Somebody. Despite his immense contribution to music, he remained largely unrecognized outside the industry, and his personal life reflected the challenges that often accompany unsung talent. Throughout his career, David worked tirelessly in studios and on tours, delivering performances that were essential to the success of high-profile artists. However, as a session musician, he earned far less than the stars he supported, and the lack of royalties and residual income meant he never built the wealth one might expect from a lifetime of musical achievement. Contracts and industry practices left him without long-term financial security, and despite the widespread success of the albums he played on, he remained vulnerable to economic hardship. In addition to financial challenges, David faced health issues that further strained his circumstances. Medical care and hospital bills became a significant burden, and at the time of his death, he reportedly had no insurance or savings to cover these expenses. The combination of limited financial compensation, lack of industry recognition, and mounting medical costs created a precarious situation that he could not escape, even as the music he helped create reached millions of listeners worldwide. David Williams passed away in March 2014. His death, like much of his life, went largely unnoticed by the general public. He left behind a body of work that remains influential in R&B and pop, yet he did not enjoy the wealth or comfort his talent merited. The man who contributed to some of the greatest recordings in modern music ended his life in financial vulnerability and obscurity. David Williams's story is one of extraordinary skill overshadowed by hardship, a quiet tragedy that underscores the harsh reality faced by many behind the spotlight. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge was a groundbreaking talent whose career broke barriers for African American performers in Hollywood. She became the first African American woman nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress for her role in Carmen Jones. Her beauty, charisma, and commanding performances captivated audiences worldwide. Songs and performances like That Old Black Magic and appearances in films like Porgy and Bess cemented her reputation as a multi-talented performer who could sing, dance, and act with unmatched grace. Despite the accolades and public admiration, Dorothy's life was marked by financial instability, personal hardship, and isolation. Throughout her career, Dorothy faced systemic challenges in an industry rife with racial discrimination. Opportunities were limited, and many of the roles she was offered failed to reflect her talent or provide long-term security. While she achieved fame and recognition, she was often underpaid for her work, and contracts failed to provide sufficient compensation for her contributions. Earnings from films and performances were often consumed by legal fees, management issues, and personal expenses, leaving her without the financial stability that should have accompanied her achievements. In addition to financial struggles, Dorothy battled depression and substance use, which intensified the difficulties she faced. Relationships and marriages brought additional pressure, both emotionally and financially, and left her vulnerable to public scrutiny and private despair. Her health and well-being deteriorated as the pressures of maintaining a career in an unforgiving industry weighed on her. Dorothy Dandridge died on September 8, 1965, at the age of 39. Her death was ruled an accidental overdose, yet it reflected years of unresolved struggles with finances, personal issues, and addiction. At the time, she was living in near obscurity, largely forgotten by the public, and in financial distress. The woman who had commanded stages and screens with elegance, talent, and pioneering presence ended her life in poverty and isolation. Dorothy's story is a stark reminder that groundbreaking achievement does not guarantee security, and that even those who seem to shine most brightly can be consumed by struggle. Her life, full of brilliance, ended in quiet tragedy. Which of these R&B stories shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you are always first to catch our latest content.